You ever get that weird feeling of déjà vu when you're using an AI? You ask it for an idea and you swear you've heard that exact phrase before? Well, you might be onto something. Today, we're diving deep into what some are calling the artificial hive mind, and we're going to figure out why our most advanced AIs are all, well, starting to sound the same.
It seems like a simple question, right? Do all AIs think alike? But the answer has some pretty huge implications. If you've ever played around with a few different chatbots, asking them for a creative idea, you've probably noticed they kind of land in the same ballpark. But is that just a coincidence, or is there something much, much bigger going on here? Okay, just look at this. This is wild. Researchers gave a super simple creative prompt. Write a metaphor about time to 25 different AI models. We're talking models from all the big players. And what happened? Overwhelmingly, they all came back with the same exact concept. You can see this huge cluster right here. They're all saying time is a river. It's a really stark example of creative minds, or in this case, artificial minds, all thinking as one when we'd expect them to branch out.
Now, this isn't just some weird quirk. It actually has a name, the artificial hive mind effect. It's this tendency for different AI systems to just default to the same well-worn paths, almost like they're thinking in a pack. And this lack of diversity, this lack of originality in what they produce, that's exactly what we're here to investigate.
We're all familiar with a natural hive mind, right? Like bees or ants working together in this perfect, almost unthinking unison. But what we're seeing now, it looks a lot like the birth of an artificial one. And it's not by design. It's an accidental consequence of how we're building and training these things. So the question is, how did researchers actually prove this was happening?
So how in the world do you measure something as fuzzy as creative thinking? To really get to the bottom of this, researchers realized they couldn't just use the standard off-the-shelf tests. Nope, they had to build a brand new tool from scratch, kind of like a detective's kit, designed specifically to push these AI models to their absolute creative and conceptual limits.
See, the problem was that all the existing tests for AI diversity were just way too narrow. They focus on really specific tasks like write a sonnet or generate some numbers. But that doesn't capture the messy, open-ended way you and I actually use AI, right? For brainstorming, for coming up with new ideas, for real creativity. So they built this thing called the Infinity Chat Dataset, and they went big. First, they grabbed over 37,000 real questions that people asked chatbots out in the wild. Then they actually used an advanced AI to sift through all of that and pull out only the truly open-ended prompts. The ones that don't have a single right answer. The result was this massive, amazing data set of over 26,000 questions that really demand genuine human-like creativity.
So what kind of questions are we actually asking these AIs? Well, it turns out, when you combine creative content generation and brainstorming, that's over 70% of our queries. That's huge. We're not just asking for facts and figures. Most of the time, we're asking for inspiration, for originality.
And this wasn't just about, write me a poem. This dataset covers this huge range of complex human thought. People are asking AI to grapple with ethical dilemmas, with cultural nuances, with historical analysis, even with humor. This is the rich, complicated territory where you'd think diversity would just thrive.
Okay, so with their brand new detective kit in hand, the researchers were ready. It was time to put the hive mind to the test. And what they found? Well, it reveals just how deep this problem really goes.
All right, the first finding is something I'm sure you've experienced yourself. It's called intramodel repetition. This is when you ask the same AI for, say, 5 different ideas, but it just keeps giving you slightly different versions of the exact same concept. It's like it's stuck in a creative rut and just can't get out.
This heat map shows the problem perfectly. Each column is a different AI model, and all that deep red and orange, that means a high percentage of very similar answers. So the big takeaway here is that over 79% of the time, the answers from a single AI were basically identical. And that's even when its randomness settings were cranked all the way up to max.
But this is where it gets really concerning. The second finding is what they call intermodel homogeneity. This isn't just one AI repeating itself. This is the big one. It's that different AIs, built by competing companies, thousands of miles apart, are all starting to converge on the exact same ideas and phrases.
So let's go back to our time metaphor from the beginning. This visualization shows the responses from all 25 models. And look, despite all the different ways you could possibly describe time, their answers basically collapse into just 2 main ideas. The huge cluster on the left is time is a river, and that tiny little one on the right is time is a weaver. That's it. A vast creative space just shrinks down to two predictable concepts.
And it's not just abstract stuff. Check this out. For simple product description, two totally different AI models produce text with huge chunks of verbatim overlap. Phrases like elevate your iPhone and bold, eye-catching designs. They just showed up in both. It's like they're all reading from the same, very short, very unoriginal script.
This similarity matrix, this is the smoking gun. Each little square compares the output of two different models. And the fact that it is a sea of red and orange tells you everything you need to know. Almost every model is highly similar to every other model. There are no little pockets of unique thinking. The hive mind, it's real.
So the big question is, why? Why is this happening? Well, the story has a pretty big twist. It turns out the very systems we've designed to train and evaluate AIs, the ones that are supposed to teach them what a good answer even is, they are a huge part of the problem.
Think about it. When you ask a bunch of people to judge something creative, you're going to get a ton of different opinions, right? This chart shows that. It shows high entropy, which is just a fancy way of saying there is a healthy, wide variety of tastes. When it comes to creativity, there isn't one right answer. And we humans, we get that. It's a feature, not a bug.
But now, look what happens with AI judges. As human disagreement goes up, in other words, as the task gets more subjective and creative, the AI judge's ability to agree with humans completely falls off a cliff. They are fundamentally bad at handling the nuance and messiness of diverse human preferences.
And this really gets to the heart of the conflict. We humans, we appreciate a wide variety of answers, even weird, quirky ones. But AI judges, they're trained to find the consensus, the one single best answer. And in doing that, they end up punishing originality and rewarding conformity, which then teaches the generative AIs to do the exact same thing. Okay, so this isn't just some abstract academic problem. The artificial hive mind has some serious real-world consequences for our culture, for our own creativity, and for the future of how we work with technology.
The risks here are pretty significant. We could be looking at a future with a real homogenization of culture, where AI just endlessly repeats the most popular mainstream ideas. This could end up stifling our own creativity, pushing out newer niche concepts. And frankly, an AI that can only give you one type of answer just becomes a much less useful tool for everybody.
And here's the really dangerous part. It's a feedback loop. New AIs are being trained on an internet that's getting more and more filled with content from older AIs. Then, they're fine-tuned and judged by other AIs that prefer conformity. It's a self-perpetuating cycle, a digital echo chamber that could lead to an ever-shrinking landscape of ideas.
Which all leads us to this one final critical question. As we start relying more and more on AI to be our creative partner, we have to ask ourselves, is it a tool that's going to expand our imagination and help us explore new frontiers of thought? Or is it going to subtly train us to think inside its own increasingly narrow box?